You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with us now is Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Mr. Jim Atkins from Ardella. Thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
Jim, we had a chance to watch the PKS financial audit presentation done by Ashley Stearns at the January 20th meeting. Very positive meeting and a lot of good information, and she did a nice job of highlighting the main topics, right?
I think she does an excellent job. I mean, she's very clear and concise about what she's talking about. She doesn't drown you with a lot of unnecessary information. She gives you a look at what kind of position the county is in financially, how the finance department is improving each year on getting the information to them and getting these audits completed. And it's changed a lot over the last couple of years that I've attended the council meetings watching Ashley present.
So, Joe, she didn't bury the details, and I know that you had a chance to review this. Mm-hmm. When you look back at, we made such a stink about it last year when it came out so late.
Yeah.
Were you pleased, and are you excited to be able to go through this?
Oh, it's a definite improvement as far as us getting the access to it, you know, and I really hope that improvement continues, because that's where you want to be, is you want to have the time to digest the material.
We'll talk about digestive material. I mean, I want to bring in Mike Goldberg because his work experience, his background allows him to really go through this.
He knows numbers. Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to him about it, and I'd like to bring you back in just to get your thoughts on that.
Sounds good.
All right. So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to bring in Mike Goldberg, and we're going to actually go through the highlights of the financial audit. Welcome back to Open Agenda. In the studio with us now is Mike Goldberg from Del Mar. Thanks for coming in.
Of course.
Jim, thanks for sticking around.
Sure.
So we had a chance to see the audit presentation from PKS. Ashley Stearns came into the council meeting on January 20th. They stated back in November that they were going to be there, and they were there. A lot of positives came out of this, right, Jim?
Yeah, there are a lot of positives in the numbers. Shows the county is in fairly good shape. It's nice to have this information before they get into the CIP and the budget, which we haven't had in the past. It's always been late March, early April before we get this information, but it's an improvement and it's good.
Well, and we made a stink about this last year. We thought it came out way too late. And Mike, I mean, you still think it needs to come out when the charter says, right?
Of course it should, but it is an improvement, so we'll take the improvement.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see another one next year as well. So let's talk about some of the highlights. I mean, ultimately, Ashley Stearns did say that she was able to issue a clean audit.
I'm pleased to state that we've issued an unmodified, previously known as an unqualified opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that a public accountant can provide on any financial information. It's also known as a clean opinion. We did identify two significant deficiencies within our report related to some grant reconciliations and account reconciliations, but we identified no material weaknesses. Just as a comparative note, last year at this time, we had identified 3 deficiencies. So we've seen a betterment in internal controls and have been able to drop that down to only 2 deficiencies for 2025.
Deficiencies, 2 of them, which was down from 3 from the year before. And there were no non-compliance issues, right, Jim?
Correct. Yeah.
So you talked about the numbers. There was a couple key facts, and can you talk about a few of those?
Well, I think some of the numbers we're talking about the unrestricted position of the county and how much of that is the total. And I guess the most concerning part is that the unrestricted portion increased by 32.7 million over last year. And, you know, we need a little more definite numbers. And this unrestricted net positioning we need to know where this money is going and what it's being spent on.
Well, but Mike, there is another benefit to having this much unrestricted, and you and I have talked about it. I mean, we're both very fiscally conservative, and we're really concerned about the state's position and what that might do to the county. And much to your point, and at least now we have this information early enough to form our own budget, What did you garner out of what Jim was just saying in the presentation about the net position?
Well, I was glad to see that there was an increase in the net position. Apparently, it was around 40%. So it's an important improvement, even though there is going to be some annual fluctuation on that net position due to the position of the pension funding.
The unrestricted net position totaled just over $117 million, or 40% of the net position. That's a $32.79 million increase from 2024 to 2025. Now that sounds like a lot. But what happens with our full government-wide financial statements, the pension reporting and your OPEB reporting, which the county does not have a say over the fluctuation in investment and a fluctuation in the liability actuarial reporting, that kind of can adjust those up and down every year. So it might be a big swing from one year to another. The pension is funded at about 78% as of June 30th, 2025.
Well, and Jim, one of the interesting things you and I, when we were watching the presentation, we noticed that there is actually a $1.6 million decrease in revenues.
Yes.
We saw a slight decrease in our revenues for the general fund from 24 to 2025 by about 1.6 million. And that's entirely due to the ARPA grant, or American Rescue Plan Act grant, that was recognized in 2024 that we don't have in 2025. It's kind of the end of that COVID funding.
But I think it's important that people know it's there, but how did it come up? And this really just comes from CARES Act money no longer being there.
Exactly. I mean, the revenue for the county, when you talk about property taxes, that increased about $3.7 million over last year, and that's with a decreased property tax rate. So, I mean, there is growth in the county if you're getting more property taxes and you're charging less on your assessments. There is growth there.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the income taxes, there was almost a $5 million increase in that based off what income people have and the money they're spending. I guess one of the things, if you look at it carefully, in the other revenues, which is where the care funding is that you talked about, I mean, the county decreased by $9 million. But we have to realize, and people have to realize, that the CARES money, and in some people's mind, the COVID money, is what really built that revenue up. It was the federal government and the state pushing this money down to the counties during the 4 years we were in the pandemic. That money is now dried up. It's not coming anymore. And we're getting back to where we're looking at apples and apples.
Yeah.
The county's money versus money being shoved down to it.
Some of the reason why that money looked like it showed up in fiscal year 24 was because they can't realize that revenue until they spend it.
Until they spend it, yeah.
So now that that's gone, there will be a little bit more in the fiscal year we're in now, which was 26. We'll see this a little bit more one more time, but then it will be. We're kind of on our own.
Yes.
But that money's not really sustainable. So,
No.
But what I see as being very positive is that the tax revenues are up, both with respect to property taxes and income taxes, and the returns on investments are also up, which is, your return on investment with respect to how that money is being invested in stocks or whatever, other forms of investment the county may be engaged in. So all of the more sustainable sources of revenue, all of those indicators are up, and I view that as being very positive.
I mean, the investment part was positive, but we got to remember we just did change the rule that allows the finance department to invest up to 25% in some shorter term investments. Most of the money is still invested in at least in this fiscal year, in the state system, and it doesn't have a great return, but there's a lot of money in it.
Yes.
But this is, again, a good thing for the county taxpayers.
And it's also relatively low risk, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
You can't be rolling the dice as a private investor might be willing to do. So, the way I look at it is I would rather have a smaller return on investment than have that safety factor.
Yeah.
Ashley Stearns also talked about the trends. And, as in business, I mean, trends to me matter as much as anything. I mean, obviously, net position ultimately trumps everything, but trends are great. We're on a 7-year positive trend. I mean, this is not. And you talked about the CARES Act money, and that has definitely helped build up those coffers some, and we may need that going forward. But it also, this is part of a larger trend. This goes back to 2019 at the very least.
Oh, no. Yeah, I did mention the CARES money and how that is in there and affects it and skews the numbers a little bit. But exactly what you're saying, the 7-year trend on property taxes and income taxes is an increase every year. The county for the past 7 years has shown a positive trend on that, and there's no reason to expect that not to continue.
Yeah. One area I thought was interesting, and we saw this last year, is we under budgeted our income tax revenue by over $15 million this year. And, okay, never a bad thing when you have more money than you think, but I would like to challenge some folks to think about is if you have an extra $10 million, that it's not really extra, it needs to stay. But why are we bonding some of the projects we're bonding where if you take a $10 million bond over 20 years, it's doubled in price? Yeah. I'm not asking to spend extra money, but I'm saying I think we should look at maybe how much of this money we are actually bonding.
Oh, no question about it, because obviously you're paying interest on bonded funds. So if we have the money, for lack of a better term, in cash, spend that, save yourself the interest payments. Yeah. It's going to be cheaper for the taxpayers. And, and that's the ultimate goal here, is to do the things that government needs to do at the lowest possible cost to taxpayers. Yeah. That's good financial management.
Yes, and exactly on that point, if you look at the expenditures by departments and they break it down, the debt service is a 7%. That is the same amount of money, percentage, that is being spent for public works. So and they said through the audit that we spent $14 million less last year than we budgeted to spend. So exactly to your point, if we're borrowing money on bonds and we have $14 million that we planned on spending last year but was not spent, that's going into this debt service, the 7% that we're paying interest on each year. Why are we not spending? Are we not planning correctly? We're going out and borrowing money, but then we're not spending that money.
I would say that we're not planning, correctly in that regard, and I think that it's vital to reduce your interest payment obligations to the fullest extent possible, because that's just money out the window. You're not buying anything with that. That's your cost of borrowing money. The more you can reduce that, the more money we have to actually apply to things, to projects, or to recurring expenses that we. Well,
and there's one other danger here, is you go from, you think you have all this money in the bank, 90-some million dollars or over $100 million. Right. But when so much of it goes to debt service, it looks like we could almost take on more spending. And I think that would be a poor idea for this county, particularly given the state of financial affairs that the state has got to send, right?
Absolutely. Look, if you just buy a house, what's the mortgage company looking at? One of the first things they're looking at are your debt ratios. And if your debt ratio is too high, you have too much outstanding, debt obligation, that's going to cause closer scrutiny. You have to be within that window where you have the safety margin. That's going to reduce your risk.
So at the end of the day, our actual revenues are over $22 million greater than they're budgeted, and we, as I stated before, that they did receive. It's actually almost $16 million in additional money in income tax. How does this relate to the property tax cap rate? Because as Jim mentioned, we did get a reduction in it last year, but there was a lot of talk through the budget process when the budget was proposed of busting the revenue cap to fund education.
Well, we've talked about this on the show in the past, and I think it's a difficult concept for a lot of people to get their heads around. But as assessed values go up, as the value of your house goes up, then we have to bring the tax rate, the property tax rate, down in order to not increase property taxes by that 2%. So they're inversely proportional.
Yeah. Otherwise, you would get the increase in the assessed value and potentially the same rate, and it would just go up. I mean, we saw this back in the 90s. I mean, I lived here through it. I mean, I think you did as well, right?
Yeah.
But this shows just how well the property tax revenue tax cap is working for the people of Wicomico County. The net result is that we're getting more revenue and limiting the amount of property taxes that the average Joe or the average Mike pays.
Is there any other highlights that stuck out to you from the presentation itself?
I just think that the biggest thing, and I've already spoken about it a little bit, so I won't dwell on it, but if we are going to budget to do projects and we spent $14 million less than we budgeted to do those projects, why are the projects not being completed? Why is the pension fund not funded at a higher rate? I think it said 78%.
78%, but they would like for it to be at least 80.
Yes. So, why isn't that? Last year, they put $500,000 in that to up it a little bit, but that $500,000 came from public works.
Road paving.
Road paving.
It wasn't just
public
public.
happen.
Yeah, it was
road paving. It wasn't that they had money left over. It's that they didn't spend the money. And those are the questions that you have to ask. If you're planning to fix the infrastructure of the county, why have you not done that?
Mike, were there any other highlights that stuck out to you?
Well, on enterprise funds, that's the revenue generating enterprises in which we're engaged, such as the landfill, where fees are charged. The revenues were up, but the expenses were up also. I'm a little bit concerned for the future on that, because since we are now disallowing out of county trash, our revenues at the landfill going to decrease. I think there's very little question about that.
But then also the expenses should decrease if that happens.
I don't know if the expenses will actually decrease proportionally, because you're still going to have the same number of employees. You're still going to have the same equipment, the same maintenance and replacement of that equipment. I don't think expenses are actually going to decrease that much.
I think that they should. I mean, their net position went up $400,000. I mean, their revenues increased by a little over $1 million. Their expenses increased by $700,000. But presumably, if there's less trash coming into the landfill, they'd have to go get less soil from Conley Mill and less trucking expense coming from that.
Well, I mean, that's a possibility, but I would not expect the expenses to decrease at the same rate that the revenues are. So
one thing you brought up was enterprise funds. I mean, in the next audit, we're actually going to only have the one enterprise fund.
That's the only one left now.
The airport is no longer enterprise, and the civic center won't be either. So we're only going to have one enterprise fund.
The landfill itself, and it's a situation where, and of course, they talked about the tipping fee rate increase. So as your expenses are going to go up, your revenues, I feel, are going to go up at the same time. So,
well, to Mike's point about worrying about the net position of the one enterprise fund that we'll have left, tipping fees have come up each of the last two budget cycles.
Yes.
And I don't think the council's handled them particularly well, and I don't think the county executives handle them particularly well. I think anybody who's out there watching this episode right now who doesn't think that tipping fees are going to come back up at this next budget cycle, you've not been paying any attention.
I thought they were supposed to, and I haven't kept track of it probably like I should have, but I thought there was supposed to be an increase the 1st of January.
It did. Yeah,
It did go in.
And they put that through with a resolution back last summer.
Last summer. Yeah. So, yes, at least as in the past, at least the trash hauling companies knew it was coming and could plan for it, where that has been the major problem in the past. They seem to have been left out of the conversation and could not do their contracts with their customers the way they needed to.
Well, hopefully it'll be more transparent for them and for all of us. I think this is a good start, getting the audit this early. So So I want to bring back in Joe Venosa, and I want to get his thoughts on this financial audit and just see what he has to say. All right, Jim, will you stick around?
Sure.
So stay with us. When we come back, we're going to bring in Joe Venosa, and we're going to see his thoughts on the financial audit. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Back in the studio with us is Dr. Joe Venosa from Salisbury. Thanks for coming back.
Sure.
Jim, thanks for sticking around again.
Yeah.
So, Joe, you had a chance to watch us kind of go through the highlights that Ashley Stearns presented at the January 20th meeting. So what did you think? I know you watched this on PAC 14.
Yeah. A lot of math.
Yeah.
A lot of numbers. No. It's first of all, I thought her presentation was exquisite in the sense of how it matches to the data that we have in the report itself, and I thought she did a good job presenting what often can be a very dry and sometimes overly dense set of statistics.
Yeah.
So I thought it was good to lay out the general issues, the trajectory, and sort of where things stand. I think one of the things, though, that was always ringing in my head, that still is, that is really the several million-dollar question is, for what we know about the county finances and where we go forward, how much are we going to have to be concerned about what's coming from Annapolis?
Are you referring to the disparity grant or maybe unfunded mandates that roll down to us? Because both could happen.
Well, both actually.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I was at a community meeting last night, and the fears of the disparity grant cut came up once again.
Okay.
And that seems to be a conversation that people are having, but not in depth yet, because the legislature has just begun their new session. But everyone is aware that we're going to have to deal with. I think again, even now the estimates are fluctuating, but you'll hear anywhere from 1.5 to 1.6 billion dollar deficit. So how does that affect little Wicomico County?
I mean, my opinion is we're not likely to see a cut in the disparity grant. I think we're going to see it more come from unfunded mandates.
Yes, yes.
Because I mean, look, Westmore, I think, is going to play the political game with that, or the legislature, and I think that they're going to. It's easier to almost hide the fact that we have extra expenditures. I think what we need to worry about as a county is just making sure that we're spending our money as wisely as possible, so that we, whatever way it comes, because it's going to come, that we're prepared for it.
Yeah, and that might lead back to the concern about if we're choosing to bond, for certain projects when we already have the money, and we should always budget for the most pressing situation that we may face, right? Like it's the old expression, hope for the best, expect the worst. And I think with some of the bonding issues, I'm curious to see how they play out. But I have to say, I was really surprised that we've had that much just actual growth over the last 7 years in terms of property tax revenue and, tax revenue in general.
Yeah, because income tax also is growing. It's growing faster than the property tax.
Yes, I was surprised to see it, though, for that consistent in that long of a period.
Yeah.
Jim, when you look back in the last 7 or 8 years, I mean, we've been through multiple county executives. We've been through a couple different county councils. When you see that we've been able to have that trend of sustainable, the growth has gone up. What is it you're looking for them to do as they plan this next budget cycle?
Well, I'm looking for them to continue the basis that they've done, and that is to put it very simple, to live within your means. I mean, you can't plan projects hoping that you're going to get money. You have to plan projects off the money that you have. And it kind of goes back to a topic we covered on another show another time, is there's 100 things that you want to do in the county. You've only got enough money to do 70 of them. So you budget for those 70. Yeah. When you get an unexpected windfall, or you get the disparity grant, or you get some type of money you weren't expecting, then you work on the other 30 projects that the county wasn't able to fund. But you can't go in there and try to fund all 100 of them and get them done, because you're not going to. And the audit showed we had projects planned that were not completed. So that showed that money was in the budget but wasn't spent.
It's nice to be Santa, but not always when you're trying to balance the budget. Yeah.
Well, and we did talk about this when we covered the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. There's a lack of detail in there. So if you do find that you have a windfall or you have additional investment revenue that's coming to you, if there's not a lot of detail in there, then you're not really sure what your next step is, or you're not communicating what that next step would be. Are you looking for any change, Joe, between now and when the budget gets proposed in April?
I assume there's going to be some big changes, and maybe that is just my own concerns about what I'm hearing up in Annapolis and how county leaders are going to triangulate with that situation. I'm not expecting anything major based on what was presented here, though.
Do you think the property tax cap rate will be used as a political football or a bait and switch type of maneuver like it has been the last 2 years?
Not only that, but the general budget and projects are always going to be used. You know, it's always interesting how you have the budget season, but then immediately afterward, you know, you continue on with projects that are either completed or things that are opened or have soft openings like parks, and that's where you're going to see local officials, you know, try to use their political capital. And you know, it's a shame that budgets are always politicized. They always have been. It's not a, you know, you can go back to ancient history in many societies to see that. I mean, that's why emperors put their faces on coins, right? In part. And so it's not a surprise, but I am curious to see how well or perhaps poorly it will be done this election season.
I do think it's good to remind everybody budget season will start officially in April. I mean, the CIP has been dropped, and then right after that it will be election season. So so keep that in mind. So thank you both. Appreciate your insight. Thanks for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back later this week with another new episode.
4, 3, 0, ignition, liftoff. We have liftoff.
He can't count down from 5 and